Good evening. Tonight I'm going to continue to talk about the Vancouver 1 discussion between Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson. And I am at about 9 minutes and 55 seconds and going through about 12 minutes and 15 seconds or so, approximately. Doing my best to quote these guys and talk about these matters of most importance, I think. So, Sam and Jordan are kind of already going back and forth, and it's rather fascinating. So Jordan replies in reference to talking about the positive side of the continuum of well-being, not just being, but well-being, and not just avoiding needless suffering or undue suffering in the world. So Jordan's going to begin here, and he's speaking about why he's focused on the suffering portion of it. So Jordan replies, okay, well, so I focused on the suffering element, I think, as I've done in my own work, because I think it's easier to zero in on in some sense. Like, I think it's easier for people, and I think you lay out the argument in the moral landscape kind of like this. I think it's easier, perhaps, to gain initial agreement between people on what might constitute a generalized ethic, to concentrate on what we don't want. And Sam says, yeah. And Jordan continues, I'm not saying that what we do want is unimportant, but it seems to me to be harder to get a grip on. We don't want Auschwitz. We don't want, Auschwitz. We don't want the Gulag Archipelago. And there are specific, it sounds like he's going to say something here. And then Sam says something, and Sam responds, and I would add to close the door on moral relativism here. Those who do want Auschwitz are wrong to want Auschwitz. Obviously, Auschwitz only happened because some people did want Auschwitz. Not the victim side, but the perpetrator side. And so, crucially for me, is the claim that, and he kind of pauses, he starts again, I'm a realist. I'm a moral realist. And what realism means is that there are right and wrong answers to questions of this kind. Jordan says yes. And then Sam continues, and you can not know what you're missing. In fact, we almost certainly don't know what we're missing on questions of human value. And our job is to discover just how good life can be and just what variables are making it needlessly horrible to mitigate all of that, and live in a better and better world. Jordan, there's a lot of applause there for Sam and for what they're talking about. Jordan says, okay, so that's a lot of points of agreement. And so I believe that there's a catastrophe of arbitrary moral injunction, and that there's a catastrophe of moral relativism. And that has to be dealt with. And that there are genuine differences between the proper way of behaving morally and the improper way of behaving morally. And I think that, they are grounded in human universals, even though there's a wide amount of variation. So that's a lot of points of agreement, right? So we know that there's two things we want to avoid, conceptually speaking, which is the moral relativism and this kind of moral absolutism that is grounded in an arbitrary statement of facts that you identify with religious fundamentalism. I would identify that with fundamentalism more generally, not with religious fundamentalism per se, because I see it also happening in secular states. Let's say, like Nazi Germany, and Sam has said sure at that point. And Jordan continues, so it doesn't seem to be religious fundamentalism per se, that's crucial to your argument. And that ends right around 12:15 there. And Sam had said sure, which I found that interesting right there. And I'm going to stop this right there, but I just want to make sure to note too, in fairness to Sam, that he does, he says sure, and he kind of agrees, but proceeds to say something that almost sounds like he doesn't agree. And we'll get more into that the next video here. So just to kind of quickly, I'll try to do this quickly, to talk about this, all of these good things. I agree that these are just going to be some of my commentary, my thoughts, if anyone cares to hear, and where I think things might break down or things might have been missed, or anyway. So agreed, we can all agree very readily on what we don't want. I think I would just add to those things that we don't want, the gulags and the Auschwitz and the Holocaust, things like this. Those things don't just happen overnight, usually speaking. God, that would be awful if they did. But I think generally speaking, those have to build up over time, and before you know it, the moral landscape is a good way to put that, can become, and that's kind of what happened over in Germany and over the different countries, where over time things became right for such a thing, and I think that process matters. Just something worth kind of pointing out there. It was interesting when Sam he didn't really cut in, but Jordan was kind of in process there, and Sam really wanted to respond to the Auschwitz, to the Gulag archipelago, and responded to on the Auschwitz side at least, and said, I want to add the close the door moral relativism here. I think that's good to point that out, that closing the door to moral relativism is a good thing. I think it's maybe easy just to speak on right there, because it's just so boldly obvious that someone could make the case that Hitler and his main leaders, henchmen, whatever you want to call them, the people later accused of crimes against humanity and whatnot, those guys might say that what they were doing was a good thing. Obviously, all the victims would say it's not. And here you've got relativism playing out. I guess I just wanted to really comment on this and just say, in the form of a question maybe, does that comment of Sam's closing the door on moral relativism, I just made a note to myself, does this close the door that we've seen open so far in all of these minutes arriving to this point? And I would say no. I think that Sam's just kind of noting that this is a very clear indication of where morals, there's two sides on this moral case, generally speaking, and it showed how we are failed by saying, well, that's true for you and that's true for you. No, things end up clashing up against each other sometimes, and moral relativism is a natural consequence of that, I think. But I don't think that pointing out here how moral relativism plays out, I don't want it. I would hate for it to give this impression that Sam is completely as against moral relativism, at least so far, as this might give off an indication. Because there's other things that he has said, and I've indicated as such in the past few videos, where I think that it isn't necessarily real easy to point out per se, but I can see how it would allow for it. It could lead to it, and all the while we're being honest though and saying that this is something we want to avoid, the moral relativism. So glad that he did point that out. So that's just a little side note worth reinforcing, I think. Of interest too, when Sam said, and you can not know what you're missing, and I'll bet we certainly don't know what we're missing, on questions of human value. And I found that so odd because I think that for every human alive, every family, every group, I think most people do kind of think that they have a little bit of a pulse and a feel for the ultimate ideas of what constitutes human value, the dignity of life, freedoms, a lot of the things that we esteem. I know the United States has esteemed a lot of these things in the past. A lot of people term it the whole Western civilization. I guess I'm just a little perplexed. I need to know more from Sam what he means by that, because it leaves me feeling like with a question mark there. I don't know of anybody that would. I guess if you it's a strange thing to put out there, because to say you don't know what you're missing. Well, what are you referring to? What is Sam imagining that could be that no one's ever thought of before, that we could possibly be missing? And why not just say maybe a couple of those things? Since he's saying quite a bit here, why not just throw out what is he referring to? It's a little bit mysterious, and I'm not sure that it's come out later. We'll see if maybe it'll come back up again, and I'll be able to kind of pinpoint this kind of thing more. I think maybe it's just in also response to what Jordan had been saying about focusing on the positive and why he's focusing on the negative. I think that maybe, Sam's just saying we don't know what we're missing. Well, I mean, we've got it kind of good, don't we? In a way, in this world, don't we want to be healthy, happy, and free, enjoy? We want to be able to work and earn and feel accomplished and laugh and be in the sunshine and breathe fresh air. We do have it. We're working back towards, we've got some struggles, but we can imagine things being a little better. So what is even better? Here again, you know what? This almost starts to sound to me like a paradise of sorts, conceptually speaking. And if not paradise, then what? Is there something beyond, say, a super successful person, healthy, happy, fulfilling their dreams for the most part, short of having a few pitfalls and disappointments and even, different devastations happen in their lives? I mean, that just happens, but what more does that person expect from life? These are just thoughts that come to my mind. I could be completely way off base and totally missing something here, but that just sounds like there's just something being said. And so where's the concreteness from that? That would be a question I would have. So, and then with it, and our job is to discover just how good life could be, and and just what variables are making it needlessly horrible to mitigate all of that. Oh, needlessly horrible and to mitigate all of that and live in a better and better world. So, what variables, what is he talking about? What's making life needlessly horrible? I can only imagine and take from what he's already spoken of in other things I've heard Sam speak on, and that would maybe be the extreme examples where people kill, maim, and harm, or help try to prevent the stem cell research, that sort of thing, which I had already talked on about why I don't think that's really a hang-up that anyone could have anymore. There was a point, I remember a little bit, thinking back, people were concerned for a while what the stem cell research meant, how it was going to happen, and prevent, there was some little bit of scare tactics going on. Don't you guys think that at this point in time that's kind of more an excuse that what might be being used now that's not legitimate? that we're trying to prevent the science. Who right now is overly concerned about the stem cell stuff, and trying to stop and halt that science if it's happening. I think it was connected to life, and that was before we learned more about adult stem cells and all these things. I don't know. I would agree with Sam absolutely, though, on the other big extreme things that would hinder life and freedom and the pursuit of happiness, like killing and maiming, for sure. Yeah, all that extreme stuff. But if not that, then what are we talking about? That's not mysterious either, but he's talking like we're going to discover those things that are making life needlessly horrible. That sounds so strange to me, without giving specifics, and yet it sounds like it's hard. He's presenting these hard to argue with ideas, and it's kind of a lofty sentiment. It sounds like a weighty, lofty sentiment, like a great thing, but really it's like a wisp of smoke. It's a weightless thing. It doesn't have any real weightiness to it. Like, we don't know what Sam's referring to there. And if it's not some mystery, then just why not say it? Like, da-da, like, and da-da. Fill in the blanks. What variables are making it needlessly horrible? Well, I've just named a couple things: killing and maiming people. Like he mentioned, chopping off people's hands in certain countries that steal. That was bad. But that's not something that we need to discover. And we've already outlawed that in our country. So we've arrived on that. Everyone's arrived. So there's that. I find it a tiny bit problematic because it sounds like there's a point that's being made, and I'm not sure that there is. But it could be a precursor. It could be something we're going to delve into more later and explore more later. Let's see. Okay, and then it's interesting when Jordan talks about behaving morally and the proper way of behaving immorally. Arbitrary moral injunctions. Oh yes, on that. Again, I'd like to know exactly what Jordan means by that, but he speaks of it being a possible catastrophe. I think there's probably a lot of things in history where there's been something set up, something set in place, and there's these injunctions set in place, some authoritarian type of thing saying this and this and this and this, laws, moral codes, and different things, and suggestions like, if there is truly just arbitrary moral injunctions in place that cause problem and fallout, well, that wouldn't be good. But I think it might be fair to say, in the fairness to, this is going to sound so strange, in fairness to a possible, and keep in mind when I say what I'm about to say, I'm speaking outside of myself, so to speak, and trying to speak just generally of the universe and a possible God here, okay? Leaving my views aside in case anyone knows me and gets all concerned or something. In fairness to a possible ultimate God, creator type being, mind type being, we have got to talk about this. This is really critical as an idea of being fair. Put all preconceptions aside for a minute as I say this, because I am doing that of myself first, so I'm being fair. The idea that there could be a possible ultimate God, creator, being, or mind that would be a true, legitimate cause for the effect that we see, that could make sense of it, that would actually be a genuine cause. That being, bear with me for a second here, that mind being the cause, with intention, with a ton of power, a ton of knowledge, everything at its disposal, something outside of time and space, something capable of the Big Bang, things like this. That thing would could be, theoretically just speaking here, the thing that would be a moral law giver, could be that moral code giver. And it would explain why, what Jordan goes into here in a little bit too. He's speaking of why we see a lot of similarities and a lot of humanity in a lot of cultures throughout all of time. There's certain things that do seem to be grounded in humans, with, sure, a wide amount of variation, but that are wrong or that are good, and an ultimate being that accounted for all that we know and see would have in its right, this is what I'm trying to say, would have within its right, despite what something lesser than, which would be us, we would be the lesser than things here. As great as our minds are, as amazing, and at the point that we are in history, this is incredible, right? No one's denying that. But whatever accounts for us, that thing has within its right to be a possible baseline, grounding, anchoring, moral code designator, so to speak, that baseline with which would explain what is within the heart of every human, or nearly every human that's not very ill, and some that we would see some common characteristics flowing through that. I just want to say that I'm not trying to insist and insert a God there even necessarily, although it could sound like it. So for those being gracious and generous with your thoughts for a minute there, thank you. And jumping back in to what they were saying, the reason why I thought of that right there was that the arbitrary moral injunction, it was always going to be a catastrophe unless it were happening to be that absolute correct thing. Because here's why that might suck to some people, or forgive me for saying that. That might really stink and be horrible to some people out there in the world. Again, in theory, bear with me, it in essence would be the thing you can't argue with. Now, before that sounds just too upsetting for someone to consider, look at our own communities, look at our own levels of society and powers that be. We already live like we give a form of an allegiance to the governments that are over us. Every country has its own topic of much discussion as of late in politics, and rightly so. And so the proper leadership in place. Gosh, and we get so mad and angry, and then we get so happy, and we have huge wins and huge losses within political structures. We act and live like this idea that I'm trying to say about even a higher level of being or consciousness would have over us. We already live and act like that's true within our own communities and societies. I just wanted to put that out there, that just like we wouldn't fight, or you can, here's the thing, here's the big thing. You can fight it, but why would you? Because you're going to lose, basically. So you learn to not fight it, or else you pay the price in that given country. So I'm just saying, if it's true, and it matters, I am saying all this for a reason. I'm not just saying this because I want there to be some God or something. This will come together more too. If you tend to watch my stuff, you'll see what I'm trying to say over time here. So, but arbitrary moral injunctions, that doesn't sound good, just in general. And everyone wants to get in on that game. So we want to avoid those problems. And of course, the problem of moral relativism. Oh dear, I'm getting a little bit long-winded. So he says that was critical, where Jordan was saying, and that has to be, those things have to be dealt with. And that there are genuine differences between the proper way of behaving morally and the improper way of behaving morally. And I think that they are grounded in human universals. This is what I was just talking about. Even though there's a wide amount of variation, it's kind of like in life where you see something in nature, you cannot argue, it's literally just there on the ground. There's a tree. There's a tree growing out of the ground. What accounts for this? And we love our science. Oh my gosh, it's like greatest thing. And our minds and what we're doing here. I think that Jordan's kind of looking like that, or we could be looking at it like that's what we're observing in our morals. We're going into different realms here, so to speak, or different fields, so to speak. And this is where we have this overlap. Everyone here is esteeming science. No one's going to argue with the science. But what we're arguing over really is the other observations that are absolutely within cultures and within us, undeniable impulses, which if we were to deny, would still pop up and creep up in our responses should someone try to, say, harm you or your child, or steal from you your paycheck that you were just about to go shopping for food and pay your rent with or something. You would soon very quickly act like there's indeed moral codes on this planet. You know it's wrong. You don't just think, I kind of have a feeling this might be wrong. No, you know it's wrong, and you respond accordingly. This is what everyone's talking about all the time, that needs to be responded to. It's the sense of morality. And so those are the things we wanted to avoid while we're observing the universals throughout the world. Religious fundamentalism was brought up again. That's no good. We don't like that. And then I'll end with this, where he's speaking of, where Jordan ends too, and that is, he brings up how religious fundamentalism is bad. The fundies, however you want to word that, those people, it can be problematic. I think you want to be careful. We want to delineate what we mean by it when we start accusing of it. Some people might use that term really loosely because there are fundamentals of a person's faith. That's not what I think is being talked about here. I think the religious fundamentalism, like Hillsborough Baptist types or certain cult types, people that are hurting people that are just extremists in whatever nature, and not just by accusation, but in actuality being extreme. But we see Jordan is so right and so fair to point out that if we're against that, surely we need to also be against extreme dogmatic fundamentalism of any stripe wherever we see it. Isn't that fair? If you start to buck up against this idea, you've got to ask yourself why. Sometimes it almost begins to feel like people get mad that they have a point against the side that they don't like. And if you start to create and respond in kind in a very fair way that would shed light maybe on another point that makes the other side not look so good, it's like all of a sudden the logic, reason, and rationality flies out the window. And I think that's self-sabotaging to oneself, and to anybody that would do that, because you're shooting yourself in the foot. And for what? It would be better to face the tougher things that are causing a person to act that way than to play that game with yourself, I think. He brings up Nazi Germany, and I kind of cringe a little bit because I have a feeling where that might go. I don't disagree with that, by the way. When Jordan says, I would identify with fundamentalism more generally, not with religious fundamentalism per se, because I see it also happening in secular states, let's say like Nazi Germany, or, and he kind of pauses there, and Sam says, sure. So, Jordan, kudos to Jordan for gently and delicately broaching this much needed thing that needs to be broached. It's unavoidable. It really is. And for people who want to avoid fallacies and tactics and equivocating things or relativistic fallout, it's good to face us head on, and I think that's what they're trying to do, I hope. And so anyway, the next video I'll pick up on how Sam responds to that, and I think that's all I have to say right now. I really appreciate you listening and welcome any thoughts. My goal here is to not elevate and think that my thoughts are so like must hear or worthy of listening to, as much as I love the invitation that was given to weigh in and discuss these things with each other, so that we can wade through it all and get through it and talk about it within our own networks. And I'm just trying to share my thoughts because I think that we can all learn from each other. Like I'm learning from these guys and learning to look at what their suggestions are against my possible views, to see where my weaknesses lie in my steps and my different things, my premises perhaps. So anyway, you have a great night or great day, depending what time it is, wherever you are. Take care. Bye-bye.